There's my grandfather. The last thing he wanted was a windmill. Yes, my grandfather bought it in 1924. Why he bought a windmill in 1924, don't ask me. Because wind was gone by then. The farmers had their own engine as well and ground their own corn and their own grist. Well, not everybody, because there was some that came to the mill. He had two regular farmers that kept him going, more or less. There's Banham Mill. I knew my grandfather. That's him and his wife, my grandmother, standing in front of it. I don't even remember as a boy knowing what her name was. It was always Granny. Well, he was a miller. He owned the one in, or at least he worked the one in Banham, or whether he owned it or not, I don't know. He worked it, and I presume by the fact that he'd been a miller all his life. The house where my grandfather lived and where we lived, my parents and me, was a pair of houses together at the back. They would be right at the back of the mill. The front of the mill would be where the work was done, where the corn was put in, and all that. And as a kid, I used to go up there, and watch watch the sacks come out and all that. And right at the back, by the stream, was our two houses. They're still there. Yeah, we went and had a look at them actually some years ago. My aunt wanted to go down there and have a look at them. And the people that lived in them said, yeah, come and have a look. And they changed the whole place, of course. It had been turned in from two houses into one. And yes, that was where we lived. That was just off the common. That was just a 100 yards walk from the house to the mill. And that was where the number one is where we lived, my father and mother and me. They used to feed off the common cows. They used to drive cows on, the common people did who owned them. They used to feed off it. But things have changed now, of course. He took Mr. Chase on, yes. Bill Chase. Yes, well, then, when my father came out of the Navy and went there, Chase left. Whether he got the sack or whether he not, I don't know. But he left then. My father took over from him. He was in the Navy during the war, and he stayed in the Navy until 1933. And then he came out on the reserve. And he got called up again in 1938, when all the reserves were all called up. Yeah. So he left my grandfather to look after it throughout the mill, throughout the war. Because I never had anything to do with it then, because I was still at school then, and I ran away to sea. I went to war. So that was my time with the mill. My grandfather, he ran it for what little he did. But he did it, and he kept it going. And the mill didn't need a lot, I think. My father spent about £300, I think, on repairing the mill vanes, wasn't it? That's all it. And he got it working perfectly again. My father came back. Well, that was, we're talking about 1946 now. My father, the whole story about that is that my father said that he wanted to have the last working windmill in Norfolk. That was what his intention was. And he didn't care, that cost him his marriage and everything to do that. And he just lived for the mill. But then we had the disease, what was it, pest, and that stopped people having corn for their chickens. So that all ran out and he got nothing. And that was, he then spent the time refurbishing the mill before he sold it to Vic Valiant. And then he just drifted from there on. He took a pub somewhere, and then he gave that up. And he just went and lived with his old aunt. And then when she died, he sold the house and he came and lived with us for a little while. So he got friendly with a lady in the village and he went and lived with her. So as far as keeping the mill going, he did that right up to the end. I mean, he did all the vanes and everything, repaired them all that were needed repairing, until he then only had 2 sails at one time, was right at the end. And then that collapsed as well. So he then gave it to Vic Valiant, or sold it to Vic Valiant, who then gave it to the Windmill Trust. Yeah, he gave it to them. Well, there's nobody going to buy it because it was in a terrible state when that was. Yes, I had nearly 2 years working the mill for them. Yeah, well, I was working in London. I had a letter from my father saying that him and my grandfather were both ill and that they couldn't carry on. Would I go home and help run the mill for them? My wife and I had some deep discussions about it because I never got on with my father. That was one thing about the whole thing. And anyhow, we went home because I had in my head the view that there was buildings and land so that we could be able to do business in some other way, not on the mill. But my father would not hear of anything else but keeping the windmill going in being the last windmill. So in the end we left them after we got them fit and healthy, left them with the mill again. Yeah. Most of it was done by engine when I was there. I was on the bottom one, on the bottom floor, because it was simpler. I made it simpler for myself. I mean, yes, it was an interesting couple of years. I tried to get my father to give up the mill, but he wouldn't. So I went. We left. Yes, the Eastern Daily Press came and took some photos. Yeah, Eastern Daily Press. Yeah, that would be grinding that grinding that was done with me. That was all. That's a comb sack.
Mm.
You know, I don't know whether that was wheat or what it was, or whether it was just grist. One of our sacks. You know that the comb sacks, we never used to weigh them. The comb of beans was 20 stone, comb of wheat was 18 stone, comb of barley was 16 stone, and a comb of oats was 14 stone. And all the sacks were comb sacks, as you know.
Mm.
And we had scales and everything there, but well, no, I think they did when there was any sailing quantity wanted, so many combs, they used to do that. But when they used to grind the stuff, it was just up the sack, tie it up and put it out of the sack and put it on a lorry and away it went, you know, so, and that was it. Corn was wheat and barley, and oats. Mustn't forget oats, because they used to have a special machine for oats. It was like a box affair that they used to drop the oats in, and it used to be knocked around, and it just, because it was, oats was softer, that's why it was, didn't weigh so much for a comb. Yeah, it was on the ground floor. Yeah, because you didn't use that all the year round, because the oats was only, September, October perhaps, it all depended on the weather. And that it used to be used. And that was all. But it was flayed, and it's just, they just used to feed it to the cattle. The farmers the two main farmers that worked there was Alexander and oh God. Saunders. I can't think of his Christian name. Saunders was the other. They were the people that they were mainly milk farmers. They had cows, and we ground their stuff and nearly all their stuff at the time. But we had an engine which we used, but they didn't. They were the only two. Charlie Saunders, that was him. That was him. But I can't think of Alexander's first name. But they just didn't have an engine. They were just behind the times as well, but they were both well-to-do farmers, and they didn't have horses at that time. They had tractors as well, you know, and for carting the stuff about. But yeah, I don't know whether they did it out of just to help my father or what, you know. Because they did it for all those years, right up to the war. Because they were still running around with pony and carts, my father, and everybody else had got tractors and lorries. Yeah. Now, Doherty Barber worked for Charlie Saunders, and he used to bring the corn and come and collect and take it back when it was ground already. And that bloke, Doherty Barber, his son, every year planted acorns in the common down to the river, and that's now like a forest. It's now like a forest. You had a lift which you used to pull the handle, and that put it, and that used to lift, and the chain used to go round and whatever you call them, bit of wood that was there, and the sack went up through the floors to whichever floor you wanted it on and take it off. Or you went up to that floor and got it to come up. You didn't do it from down below. If you wanted it on the third floor to drop it on the second floor, you went on the third floor and pulled the chain from there. Because it went up right up to the fifth floor. Oh yeah, they worked it out. So you just pull the chain and you see it disappear through the floor. It was Heath Robinson affair, you know. There was nothing difficult with it. It was all very simple. The workings, the chains, and everything, and the way when you pulled it up, and it just lifted it up like that lifted it up. The belt was on a wheel, and it used to just lift it up like that, so it turned the way it went. There was only half the wind that was it. Carrying a sack up is mad, completely mad. Very low, but it right on your neck, and get that through. And it just goes. Well, it just went for me, let me put it like that. Maybe somebody who was bigger than me might have not done it, but I just think, but it's, when you think about 18 stone for barley, and you used to have a lot of barley, of course, because the brewers around there, we used to cart a lot of that. It's in between. It's not cutting it or doing anything, and you had to get it from the bottom floor to the next floor to be able to move it further to get it in the truck or anything. So you used to get it on your back and go and look at the steps and say, "Here I come." And there you went. Yeah. And that second floor, I'll tell you, that second floor, you know what I'm talking about, don't you? That's a long way up there. Yeah. Go, dear, oh dear. Yes. Yeah, it's a fairly lengthy one. But there was the same bone there for all the years I knew anything about the mill. Yeah, of course, this shaft was squared so that when it went round and caught that, it just clicked it out, just, and then it just dropped a few grains in each time that it opened it up. Because that's this is somebody from Bungay filling that one up, and that would run down into there, and that just goes like that, and the bone would just snap out of your skull like that. Yeah, it's tricky, you know, when you think about it. I always used to have a piece of bone because it was a piece of wood used to break.
Yeah.
But a piece of bone lasted for nearly ever. And the bone bends nicely.
Right.
In the first place, I suppose that they put a piece of wood in there, you know, and then that kept breaking, and then somebody found a piece of bone from some animal, because it was a fair animal, wasn't it?
Yeah.
It was. I mean, it wasn't the cat next door or anything like that. It looks like a leg bone, doesn't it, of a horse or a cow or something. That's what it looks like. But what it was, because it was always there, and they never replaced it in my time. They used to use the English stones from Derbyshire. They used to use those for the grist, the rougher stuff. And for flour and stuff, they used to use the French ones, which, as you know, they're a different colour. They were a very grey colour. And there was a set of those up on the second floor. Yes, they used to grind a certain amount of flour, but it was, when I say that, it wasn't something that they did in bulk, you know. It was somebody would bring in a bag they wanted doing it, they'd put it through. They used to use the French stones for that, and they're very fine. There's a difference between the what's the word for it? Well, they're much coarser, the English stones, than the French stones. The French one, the grooves are closer, and the English ones, they're slightly wider, but they were grinding grist mainly, which was just grinding it for cattle food. When you think about them, the governors, you know, it makes you wonder, because they're just two bits of stone, I don't know where they came from, when you think they're round stones. I mean, they must have been carved at some time, because they were perfectly round, the two. There's one at each side, and they used to turn all the time. And as the wind got up and it got faster, the faster they went round, keeping it under control. The stones, actually, the slower they go, the harder they want to be down. But when the wind is blowing like hell out there and they're going like tin tacks, they don't need to be so close. They lay flat like that when it's not working, they're dead down. And as they start to turn, they start to come up. And the faster they go, the further they come up, and which gives a bigger gap on the stone. Oh yes, it's well thought out when you think about it. It's just a symbol. If you've got corn to grind, it's already set up from the day before, because so you either go and set the sails going, you pull the chain which works the spider, you know what the spider is. That's where there's bits that stick out, where they go up and down with the veins on, and they call that the spider. And you pull the chain, and the chain pulls the bar through them, and they open up and bring the vanes up. I said, well, that's the first job you have to do to get it working. That's if the wind's blowing, and if it isn't, well, you get the engine going. And then it all depends on what you've got to grind, or because if you've got a comb sack of meal to be ground for the pigs and the cattle and whatever, it is to take half an hour for a sack to fill, so you could leave it, just let it all run and let it all keep going till it filled the sack, you see. So you didn't have to stand there and watch it like I'm looking at the photograph. But that was when you're standing and watching it like that, that is when you're doing the finer stuff. Because you have to keep making sure that because it used to get blocked a bit sometimes, and then you used to have to lift the stones. But it was a lot of it was just go in and take a sack off and put another one on, you know. It wasn't hard work, not that part of it. To grind it, well, it all depends how strong the wind is, how fast it sends the stones round. A maximum, on a bad day, it would be half an hour. If it's grinding in a hurry, it'd be a quarter of an hour or so to do. When the wind was, when the wind was high, you used to be standing there nearly all the time, taking them off. You'd take them off, and then when you'd finished grinding it, then you'd carry them up or whatever, if you wanted to. It all depended what you're going to do with it, whether that was going out to another farmer wanted it out for him, or whether you want to take it to somebody. It was tarred in the first place. In my time, I've tarred it, so I know what it's like. We had a brush on a long handle, and we went round the outside of the cap and did it, and it like that, all the way round. I never did it more than twice. It's not a job you go and volunteer for regularly. When you stand on the outside and looking down, as you should never do, of course. I did the tarring for them as a volunteer to them for my father, when I believe I was still at school when I did that. It's not a job you go and say, Dad, I'll go. You sit at another table when he comes and says, will you do this? Yeah. Yes. Tar was considered to be better than paint, because it doesn't come off in the wind and the rain and one thing or the tar just sticks there. There's an art in painting them, you know. You just go, you've got those sort of things, the tools and all that used to be up there, they're all gone, of course. But they would have been nice if some of them had been collected. You know, we had saws and something as forget the other name of the other ones that we used to have. Because the only thing that they had is an engineer for the engine. which wasn't very often. The engines don't give up very often. They need a new piston ring every now and again. That's all they wanted. My father did all the maintenance on it except for all the engineering part, and that was done by a firm in Dis. I can't remember the name of them. It was done by this firm. It's the railway carriage, which was the office and the workshop. The first part of it was the office, and the rest of it was the work office, playing with the workshop, where they did the repairs to the sails and things, and any repairs that needed doing. This is a better one. There's the engine shed, look. And there was with the haystack. My father had a field, hired a field from Sir John Mann, Sir Edward Mann,
Right.
that he used to cut it, and they used to stack it all the hay. He used to have the hay, they used to stack it, and that must have been just about September when they cut it, because that's full.
Yeah.
Yes, that was Sir Edward Mann in my day. Yes, that picture shows most of it. That shows everything, where the carriage was and where the stack was, and the stack has just been filled up. There you are, look, there's another picture of the shed, look. The engine shed, the white bit. And it had a belt which drove into the mill, which drove the stones. It was covered in belt, mind you. It was in the cover. It was about that high, off the ground. My father and my grandfather. Just trying to place where that is in the mill. Oh, that's outside. That's the car. That's the cart. That's the cart for where we used to put the corn in, and the horse used to pull it all around the village. And they lived. But he wanted to be the last mill working in Norfolk, and that was the end. There's nothing else to live for.
Mm-hmm.
Cost him his marriage and everything. That's their cart. Pity we haven't got a horse. There's I don't know whether you've got one bigger than that one. That was the stable, and that one there was the cart shed. And here, where there's nothing, used to be where the haystack used to be kept. Yeah. Well, everybody else had a lorry, we still had a horse and cart. And that was another one of the reasons that, yeah. That's my father. That was when he was retired and finished with everything. Yeah. And he had a stroke and died. See him in hospital, it's a terrible sight, man. When he was a hale and hearty bloke, you know.
Yeah.
But he found it was too much for him in the end. I mean, he had to give it up. He gave it to, or he sold it to Vic Valiant. I don't know how much he got for it. He couldn't couldn't have been much, because it was derelict. And then Vic Valiant gave it to the Windmill Trust. So they have the honour of doing everything now. There's a photograph from the photograph of the garden of the house where we lived, showing the mill from the garden. Yeah, it was. I was going to say it was an interesting time, but it is interesting when it's all over and done with. Just talking about it. It would be nice to have the mill down the bottom of the garden. Yes.